The median American retirement savings is $87,000. That is the Federal Reserve's number. The average gets dragged up to $333,000, but the median, the number that describes where you actually land if you're a typical American household, is $87,000. And 54% of Americans have zero. Not a little, zero. So if you came here to find out the real number, you already have it. Now, I'm going to show you why that number is only half the horror story. The magic number Americans say they need to retire comfortably in 2026 is $1.46 million. The median retirement savings for those aged 55 to 64 is $185,000, and 65 to 74 is $200,000. That's a gap of over $1.25 million for the people closest to the finish line. That is not a savings shortfall. That is a structural collapse dressed up in a business casual outfit. Here's what I'm going to walk you through today. First, why the number you keep hearing is technically accurate and functionally useless. Second, why the plan to just work a few more years fails more than half the time and not for the reasons people think. Third, why the most popular retirement withdrawal rule in history is already being quietly renegotiated by the guy who invented it. And fourth, the 3-level framework that actually tells you where you stand and what to do next. Stick with me through the middle of this, because there's something around the 60% mark that completely changes how you should be thinking about the timing of all of this. Think of retirement savings in America like a public swimming pool. Someone tells you the average depth is 8 feet. Sounds reasonable. You jump. You hit the bottom at 3 feet because one end goes down to 20 and is pulling the average way up. The average was a perfectly accurate description of that pool, and it gave you zero useful information about where you were about to land. That pool, by the way, is your 401k. And most people are standing at the shallow end thinking they're in the deep section. I'll come back to the pool. The average retirement savings for all families is $333,940. The median is $87,000, and only 5% of households with retirement accounts have $1 million or more saved. So when financial media runs the headline, Americans have saved over $300,000 for retirement, they are not lying. They're just doing math in a way that describes the pool depth at the far end and telling you to jump from anywhere. Across generations, the average retirement balance is much higher than the median, as high net worth individuals tend to drive up the average. This is not a conspiracy, it's just how means work. But it has a very real consequence. A lot of people look at the average and feel either falsely reassured or falsely panicked. Neither of those is calibrated to their actual situation. Here's the number that should concern you more than either the average or the median. 54% of Americans report no dedicated retirement savings, according to the Federal Reserve's 2022 Survey of Consumer Finances. More than half. And if you parse that number more carefully, it doesn't get more comforting. 20% of adults ages 50 and over have no retirement savings, and more than half, 61%, are worried they will not have enough money to support them in retirement. 20% of people who are already in the red zone, not the people who have 40 years to figure it out, the people who are 5 to 15 years from the door. Now, I want to give you the age by age breakdown, because this is where the pool metaphor really kicks in. Americans in their 20s have an average retirement savings balance of $139,616. The median is $42,502. Fine, you've got time. Americans in their 30s have an average retirement savings balance of $275,377. The median is $92,533. Still has a pulse. Americans in their 40s have an average retirement savings balance of $573,660. The median is $208,390. Now the spread between average and median is getting violent. Americans in their 50s have an average retirement savings balance of $1,020,838. The median is $438,866. Two completely different pictures. The average person in their 50s using the average number thinks they're on track. The person using the median is staring down a $400,000 hole in the most expensive decade they'll ever live through. That is the pool. You are almost certainly standing in the shallow end. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the most dangerous assumption in all of retirement planning, one that more than half of Americans make, and why the math on that assumption doesn't just fail, it fails at exactly the worst possible moment. But first, let me show you why the size of your account is only one of three things that actually matter. There's a three-level reality to retirement readiness. Most people think they're in level 2 when they're actually in level 1, and almost no one is in level 3. Level 1 is the silent majority. 6 in 10 Americans agree that they could work until retirement and still not save enough to meet their needs. These are the people who will rely almost entirely on Social Security, which, and I want you to hear this number clearly, the average Social Security monthly check for retired workers reached $2,079.49 in March 2026. That's $24,958 a year. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the average household, led by someone 65 or older, spent about $57,818 annually. That gap, $32,000 a year, between what Social Security provides and what a typical retirement actually costs, has to come from somewhere. For level 1, it doesn't. Level 2 is where most of this video's audience lives. You have something. You have a 401k or an IRA. You're contributing. Maybe not maximally, but you're in the game. If you have the median savings for your 50s, $438,000, and you apply the 4% rule, you're withdrawing $17,520 a year from your portfolio. Add $2,079 in Social Security. That's $3,932 a month. $37,000 and change annually. Still about $20,000 short of average household spending. That is level 2. You are not broke. But you are making trade-offs in retirement that you haven't started mentally accounting for yet. Level 3 is where very few people are and almost everyone thinks they're heading. Only 5% of households with retirement accounts have $1 million or more saved. 5%. Not 20, not 40, 5. By the way, hit subscribe if you like this. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that breaks a lot of carefully constructed retirement timelines. You think the problem is that you don't have enough money. The actual problem might be that you're planning to work until 65, and the math has already quietly decided that you're probably not going to. More than half of workers, 58%, retire earlier than they planned, usually due to unforeseen circumstances. According to research from the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, in collaboration with Transamerica Institute, the median age, they call it quits, is 62, 3 years shy of the traditional retirement age of 65. And here's the part they don't put in the brochure. Of those who retired early, most pointed to health-related reasons, with 46%, followed by employment issues at 43%, and family reasons at 20%. Just 21% said they retired early because they are financially stable. 21%. So roughly 1 in 5 early retirees chose to stop working. The other 4 were pushed. There is a man I want you to picture. His name is Marcus. He's 58. He spent 22 years in tech project management, good salary, solid health insurance, and a 401k that he has been steadily contributing to since his mid-30s. He has $147,000 saved. He knows it's not where he'd like to be, but he has a plan. Work until 65, max out his contributions for the next 7 years, and walk away with somewhere around $400,000 plus Social Security. He has run this math, the math works. He has told his wife the math works. Then a mid-sized software company decides to right-size their organization in Q3, and Marcus's entire department becomes a line item. He's 58. He sends out 46 applications over 7 months. He gets 3 interviews. He gets 0 offers. 28% of stable, long-time employees sustain at least one damaging layoff by their employers between turning 50 and leaving work for retirement. The percentage of retirees who report having been at least partly forced to retire has risen from 33% in 1998 to 55% in 2014. Marcus doesn't retire at 65 with $400,000. Marcus retires at 62 with 147,000 and a Social Security election decision that will define the next 30 years of his financial life. If Marcus claims Social Security at 62 instead of waiting until 70, the difference between claiming at 62 versus 70 is a permanent 54 percentage point gap in monthly income for life. Permanent, not recoverable. One decision made under financial stress that reshapes every month for the rest of his life. This is the subplot I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through the next section, because Marcus is not an edge case. Marcus is the median. Only 1/3 of workers have a backup plan for retirement income if they are forced into retirement before they are ready. 67% of people who are on a plan to work longer strategy have no secondary plan. That is not a retirement strategy. That is a retirement assumption dressed up as a retirement strategy. Let's talk about the 4% rule, because this is where the mainstream retirement planning industrial complex has been quietly selling people a product that its own creator just revised. The idea is simple. You retire with a portfolio, you withdraw 4% in year one, and you adjust for inflation every year after that. Bill Bengen introduced the 4% rule in a 1994 paper published in the Journal of Financial Planning based on historical US stock and bond returns dating back to 1926. His research found that a retiree withdrawing 4% of a balanced portfolio in year one and adjusting for inflation each year after would not run dry over 30 years. The figure was rounded down from 4.15%, and it stuck as a default guideline for an entire generation of retirement planning. 30 years of retirement planning built on one paper from 1994. One paper. If your doctor prescribed you medication based on a clinical trial from 1994 and told you not to update it, you'd find a new doctor. But in retirement planning, this is considered wisdom. Here is where it gets interesting. Bengen's popular retirement withdrawal rate just got a raise. It's now 4.7%. Bengen is the financial planner who introduced the 4% rule. He found that retirees could count on their retirement savings lasting at least 3 decades if they started by withdrawing 4% of their money and then increased the dollar amount each year to keep up with inflation. The strategy caught on because it offered an easy, research-backed way for retirees to gauge how much they could spend without draining their savings. So the man who invented the rule just raised his own number. Good news, right? Here's the problem. The safe withdrawal rate declined to 3.7% in 2025, from 4% in 2024, due to long-term assumptions in the financial markets, according to Morningstar research. So Bengen went to 4.7, Morningstar went to 3.7, and the gap between those two numbers is not a minor methodological disagreement. It is the difference between whether a $1 million portfolio generates $37,000 a year or $47,000 a year. That's $10,000 annually. Compounded over 25 years of retirement, that is a meaningful lifestyle gap. More importantly, and this is the point that your financial advisor is not putting on a slide deck, none of this applies to the median American in the first place, because the median American is not sitting on a $1 million portfolio trying to figure out whether to use 3.7 or 4.7. The median American has $87,000. 4% of $87,000 is $3,480 a year, $290 a month from their portfolio. Add the average Social Security check of $2,079, and you're at $2,369 a month, $28,428 a year, against an average annual household spending for a 65-plus household of $57,818. That is a gap of nearly $29,000 a year. Not a rounding error, not a planning refinement, a structural $29,000 a year hole every year for however long you live. The 4% rule, debate whether it should be 3.7 or 4.7, is a conversation happening in a different pool entirely. The shallow end swimmers are not in that conversation. They are in a conversation about which expenses to cut and whether to move somewhere cheaper. Here's the part where I want to introduce something that has genuinely changed how I think about this. Knowing these numbers and actually building a system around them are two very different things. I've been obsessed with retirement data for years, the kind of data that lives inside Federal Reserve PDFs that take 20 minutes to load. And I found that the hardest problem isn't finding the right withdrawal rate or picking the right index funds. The hardest problem is translating a pile of statistics into a specific date and a specific dollar amount that tells you when you actually get to stop. So I built something. It's called the Exit Code, a digital book built on 50 years of actual retirement data. No filler, 8 chapters of pure research distilled into a mathematical framework that turns maybe someday into a specific date. The reason I built it is because the mainstream answer to when can I retire is talk to a financial advisor, and a financial advisor charges 1% of your assets per year to manage your money and answer half your questions. On a $400,000 portfolio, that's $4,000 a year, compounding against you every year. 2 things from the Exit Code that are directly relevant to this video. The first is what I call the 58% rule, which is exactly what we just talked about, but with a specific buffer strategy built around the reality that most people exit the workforce involuntarily. The math on planning for a forced exit at 62 instead of 65 changes everything about how aggressively you need to build now. The second thing is the dynamic withdrawal method, which replaces the static 4% rule with a system that adjusts based on what markets are actually doing. So you're not pulling money out at a flat rate in years when your portfolio is down 20%, because that's the scenario that bankrupts people who thought they were safe. You can get the Exit Code through the link in the description for less than the cost of one dinner out. The math doesn't care when you start, but every year you wait compounds against you. Now, back to Marcus. Marcus is 62. He has $147,000 in his 401k. He has not claimed Social Security yet because he understands intellectually that waiting until 70 would give him the maximum benefit. But he has a mortgage. He has a wife who is 59 and not yet Medicare eligible. He has, for the first time in his adult life, nothing to do on a Tuesday morning. And he has to make a Social Security timing decision under financial pressure with no income and a personality that was built around being employed. He takes Social Security at 62. His monthly benefit is reduced permanently. His portfolio of $147,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate is giving him $490 a month. His reduced Social Security is somewhere around $1,800. His total monthly income is $2,290. His mortgage, property taxes, health insurance, because he is 3 years from Medicare and food, are not $2,290 a month. Marcus is not unusual. Middle-class households plan to spend 26 years in retirement based on a median planned lifespan of 89, according to 2025 Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies research. The median actual retirement age among middle-class retirees in their 60s is 62. That's earlier than most people plan for, often due to health or job loss rather than choice. 26 years is a long time to make $147,000 work. I said I'd come back to the pool. Here's the pool moment. Everyone standing at the edge of retirement planning is looking at the same pool. The financial industry shows them the average depth, 333,000. It looks fine. It looks swimmable. Most people jump. And then they discover in real time where the shallow end actually is. The people who don't hit the bottom are not necessarily smarter. They are people who measured the depth at the spot where they were about to land, not where Bill from Palm Beach was standing. The measurement that matters is yours, not the mean. Stay with me, because this next part changes the frame entirely. Let's talk about the structural reason this problem compounds year over year, and why the just save more advice, while technically correct, is strategically incomplete for a large portion of the population. The latest data show that 42% of full-time working Americans do not have access to retirement plans. Not 42% of poor people, not 42% of gig workers, 42% of full-time workers. Americans are 15 times more likely to save for retirement when they have access to a workplace plan. Yet nearly 57 million people do not have access to a retirement plan at work. This is not a discipline problem. If you don't have a 401k at work, The psychological friction of opening and contributing to an IRA on your own is enormous. Behavioral economics has shown for decades that default enrollment, just being automatically signed up for something, drives participation rates dramatically higher than opt-in systems. And for the 42% without workplace access, there is no default. There is just an online account they need to open, fund, and manage, alongside every other bill in their life. Here's the punchline. Empower research shows that the majority of Americans contribute to a retirement plan. 70%, though only 47% of Gen Zers say they save in a retirement plan, compared to 75% of millennials and 76% of Gen Xers. The participation rate is going up, but the starting balance is not. Because contributing 3% of a $36,000 salary into a 401k for 3 years is not the same as having retirement savings in any meaningful sense of the phrase. Now I want to flip this around. Because everything I've said so far has been describing how bad the situation is, and I find that approach incomplete. Not because it isn't true, it absolutely is, but because the psychology of describing a disaster to someone who is standing inside it tends to produce paralysis, not action. Here is the actual good news, and I do not say this to soften anything. Accounts held for 20 years or longer average $283,200, according to EBRI, a figure that reflects the compounding effect of sustained long-term saving. Time in the market explains most of that difference. Not timing the market, not picking the right sector ETF, not getting in and out around macro events, just staying in consistently for 20 years. The average 401k balance was $146,400 as of Q4 2025, up 11% from the prior year. That overall figure varies widely by generation. Gen Z averages $13,500, Millennials $67,300, Gen X $192,300, and Baby Boomers $249,300. Notice what happens between those generations. Gen Z to Millennials, $53,800 improvement. Millennials to Gen X, $125,000 jump. Gen X to Baby Boomers, $57,000. The biggest jump in your 401k balance doesn't happen in your 20s. It doesn't even happen in your 30s. It happens in your 40s and early 50s when compounding is doing the heavy lifting and your income is typically at or near its peak. That's actually the good news, hiding inside the bad news. The curve is non-linear, which means if you're 40 and you're looking at your retirement account and thinking you're irreparably behind, you may be surprised at what happens over the next decade if you increase your contribution rate and leave the market alone. But here's the thing, that good news only applies if you actually get to work those years, which, as Marcus discovered, is not guaranteed. Let me show you the 3 concrete things that change this calculus. Not general advice, specific moves calibrated to exactly this problem. The first one is what I call the timing asymmetry. Most people think about retirement as a single target date. I'll retire at 65. But the data is telling us that your actual exit date is more likely to be 62, whether you plan for it or not. So the intelligent move is to build your financial plan around 62 as the base case and treat working until 65 as the upside scenario, not the assumption. That means your savings rate needs to be calibrated to a shorter runway than you think, and your liquid reserves, money you can access before 59.5 without penalty, need to be larger than what a standard retirement planning tool will recommend. Standard tools assume you work until you want to stop. The data says that is not what happens to most people. The second one is the Social Security timing decision, and it is the single most leveraged decision most Americans will make in their entire financial lives. The federal government adds 8% to your benefit payments for each full year you delay claiming Social Security benefits beyond full retirement age until age 70. 8% per year, guaranteed, backed by the federal government. No investment vehicle on the planet offers you a guaranteed 8% annual return with no market risk. The strategy is simple. In concept, delay Social Security as long as possible and fund the gap between your retirement date and age 70 using your portfolio or other savings. The math almost always works in favor of waiting. The psychological barrier is enormous because it requires spending down savings before receiving the guaranteed income, which feels like running out. It's not. It's arbitraging the highest yielding guaranteed return available to you. The third one is the fee compounding problem. And this is where I get genuinely annoyed. Not conspiratorially, just the amused, mildly exasperated disappointment of someone who has read enough SEC filings to know how the math works. Over 30 years, a 1% annual fee on a $200,000 portfolio costs you $170,000 in lost compounding. Not fees paid, lost compounding. Money that should have compounded for you, but instead compounded for someone else. That is not a rounding error. That is a second retirement account that disappeared into an advisory fee. Low-cost index fund investing, and I say this as someone with multiple hundreds of thousands invested, with skin in the game, not theory, eliminates most of that drag. This is documented. This is math. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. Marcus, by the way, figures some of this out. Not all of it, and not quickly. He does take Social Security early, which costs him, but he moves his $147,000 into a low-cost index portfolio, stops paying the advisory fee he had been paying at his brokerage, and supplements his income with part-time consulting work for 2 years. As of 2024, 1 in 5 Americans over age 65 were still working, with roughly 38.3% working part-time. Marcus becomes part of that number by choice, which is different from being forced there by desperation. It's not the retirement he planned, but it is a retirement he can navigate because he finally stopped looking at the average retirement savings number and started looking at his own pool depth. Let me bring this back around because there's a final piece of this that almost nobody talks about. While most non-retired adults had some type of tax-preferred retirement account, such as a 401k IRA or Roth IRA or a defined benefit pension, a lower 35% of non-retirees thought their retirement saving was on track. 35%. That means 65% of people who have retirement accounts are looking at those accounts and thinking, this is not enough. They are right. And they are right for an underappreciated reason. It's not just that the balance is too low, it's that they're using the wrong map. The map that says, save as much as you can, plan to work until 65, and then apply the 4% rule. That map was drawn for conditions that may no longer exist. A 30-year retirement window, stable bond returns, voluntary exit from the workforce, and a Social Security system that can maintain full benefits indefinitely. Social Security has been on shaky financial ground for years, and as the trust funds approach depletion, benefit cuts could be on the table. It's unclear right now whether lawmakers will find a solution before that happens, and even if they do, it could still affect retirees' benefits. I'm not saying Social Security is going away. I'm saying that building a retirement plan that assumes Social Security will deliver its current scheduled benefit forever without any adjustment is optimistic in a way that the Social Security trustees themselves are not. The 3-level framework I described earlier, the people with nothing, the people with something, the people with enough, is not a permanent sorting. It's a snapshot. And the whole point of this video is that most people are standing one level lower than they think they are because they're using the average as their benchmark when they should be using the median, and they're using the median as a goal when it should be a warning. The pool metaphor, one more time, and then I'm done. You cannot swim to safety by measuring your depth against someone who is standing on the diving board. You can only swim to safety by accurately measuring where your feet will actually hit. The financial industry has a structural incentive to make you feel like the pool is deeper than it is, because your money in motion is their revenue. The average retirement savings number, $333,940, is the diving board. The median, $87,000, is where most people land. Your 3 specific takeaways from this video. Number 1, run your retirement plan assuming a forced exit at 62, not 65. The majority of retirements are involuntary health problems, layoffs, and caregiving responsibilities together account for roughly 59% of retirements, meaning fewer than half of Americans actually retire on their own schedule. Plan for what typically happens, not for what you prefer. Number 2, do not treat the Social Security timing decision as a minor detail. It is the most leveraged financial decision most people will make in their lifetime. And making it under financial stress, as most early retirees do, costs a permanent compounding percentage of every monthly check for the rest of your life. Model it, scenario test it, and build a bridge strategy so you're not forced into an early claim by desperation. Number 3, strip the fee drag out of your portfolio now, not later. 1% a year sounds like nothing. Over 30 years on a $200,000 portfolio, it's $170,000 that didn't compound for you. Index funds, low cost, stay in. Let compounding do the thing it does. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the guy who jumped into the pool without checking the depth, he didn't drown. He learned to tread water. Then he learned to measure before he jumped. That is a skill that apparently they don't teach in school. The average retirement savings for all families is $333,940. The median is $87,000. Only 5% of households with retirement accounts have $1 million or more saved. 54% of Americans report no dedicated retirement savings. The magic number Americans say they need to retire comfortably in 2026 is $1.46 million. The median retirement savings for those aged 55 to 64 is $185,000. And 65 to 74 is $200,000, far below that 1.46 million magic number. The gap is not closing. The pool is exactly as shallow as the data says it is, and the high diver is still making the average look deep.